Welcome to the Lean Solutions Podcast. This is the podcast that adds value to leaders by helping you improve performance using process improvement solutions with bottom line results. My name is Patrick Adams, and this season I'll be joined by three other amazing hosts, including Catherine McDonald from Ireland, Andy Ulrich from Australia, and Shayne Daughenbaugh from the United States. Join us as we bring you guests and experiences of lean practitioners from all over the world.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Lean Solutions Podcast, led by your host, Shayne and Catherine, the fabulous Catherine. Thank you so much, Catherine, for coming on board with us here today. Can you tell me something you've learned this week?
Hi, Shayne. Something I've learned. Do you know what? I haven't learned a lot because I was away for the weekend, but I did learn to remind the people who you're going to the airport with to bring their passport. Otherwise, you won't get on your flight. That's what I learned. So don't ask me about the weekend I've had, but that's just a little hint for everybody. Just remind people to bring their passports.
Oh man, that's a painful lesson to learn. Today, Catherine, we have Art Byrne on the show, and we're going to be learning a little bit about lean strategy. And lean strategy extends beyond manufacturing, which is what I love about the conversations that we have with all the guests. It has the potential to transform any business, enhancing overall operations by eliminating waste, delivering consistent customer value, stimulating growth, fostering a culture of continuous improvement. Lean principles enable companies to be more responsive to customer needs and increase the wealth of stakeholders if an organization has those. But we have with us here an author, a lean practitioner, and one of the, I would say one of the gurus of the lean world. And so, Catherine, tell us just a little bit about Art Byrne.
Yeah, great. Yeah, guru is exactly the right word. I'll tell you why. Art Byrne began his lean journey in 1982 as a general manager at GE, leading the first just-in-time implementation there. And as a group executive, he initiated lean at the Danaher Corporation, and as CEO of the Wiremold Company, he led a lead transformation that increased enterprise value by nearly 2,500% in 9 years and won a Shingo Prize. As an operating partner at J.W. Childs Associates, he implemented lean across their private equity portfolio. Art authored the Lean Turnaround and the Lean Turnaround Action Guide, both Shingo Prize winners. He is a member of the Shingo Academy, the Industry Week magazine, Manufacturing Hall of Fame, and the AME Hall of Fame. Wow, that is just amazing. Guru indeed. Arthur, we are so happy to have you on the show, and I'm really looking forward to talking to you. And welcome to the show. How are you today?
Fine, thank you, and thanks for both of you for having me. It's I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to it. So before we get into all the questions we have, I guess what we said to people listening is we're going to talk about the lean turnaround today. That's sort of where we're heading with this. Okay. I'd love to know, I was looking at the title, and I'd love to know when we speak of the words lean turnaround, what does that mean for you in terms of turning around an organization? What does it really, if you could boil it down, what does it look like?
Well, it really means how do you transform a company from the traditional kind of batch approach to a different, to the lean approach, really to a flow approach and a pull approach. That's really what I'm talking about with that, is how do you take any company that's been run in a traditional way, they're pretty similar. Everything is in different departments of functional departments, and everything batches as a result of that. And anytime you find that, you're also going to find tremendous amounts of waste because the functional structure all by itself creates a lot of waste. In fact, my experience is that if you find a traditionally run company that's organized functionally, most of the time it has 25 to 40% too many people. It has 5 to 6 times too much inventory. It has over 50% too much space. It has long lead times. and it has quality problems that keep popping up all the time and just to make it, they're very hard to make them go away. So that just creates,
Got it.
when you start that place, it creates tremendous opportunity by removing the waste that's there, to lower your costs, shorten your lead times, and create better customer service and grow the company. So the
Yeah.
opportunities from converting from a traditionally functionally organized company to lean are very dramatic, and it doesn't matter what kind of business you're in. It works in any kind of industry, any kind of company. In fact, I like the definition of lean that just says lean is the best strategic way to run any company. It's very different than the way lean has been described historically. I mean, if you think about why do most companies start down the lean path in the first place, I would say over 90% start down the lean path for cost reduction. They think it's a cost
Right.
reduction program, or it's some sort of problem solving program, or it's a bunch of tools that will allow you to apply these tools to solve certain problems. Nobody thinks of it really strategically, and nobody thinks that, well, oh, that was created by Toyota. They're manufacturing people, so it must be a manufacturing thing. We don't do manufacturing, and therefore it doesn't apply to us. But my
Right.
experience, the reality is that there's more opportunity in non-manufacturing companies than there are in manufacturing companies, because they've never really looked at the waste that they have. And when they do have a problem, the tendency is, let's automate it. Let's go get the computer guys and we'll write a new program and we'll automate it. And
Right.
all they wind up doing, of course, is automating the waste, and things just get worse and worse instead of better and better. So I've done lean and insurance and excuse me, insurance companies, hospitals, just distributors, that kind of thing. It applies any place. In fact, hospitals in the United States have been pretty aggressive over the last maybe 10 or 15 years of trying to apply these principles there, because
Yeah.
hospitals traditionally have been one of the worst run organizations you can possibly imagine. They do great things for you health wise, but organizationally, structurally, cost wise, they're just a mess. And they are because they have all these fiefdoms. Everything is a fiefdom in a hospital. If you go in, let's say with a broken arm, that's a minor injury. You're going to go home that night with a cast on, maybe. But in the process, you're going to go through maybe 12 different fiefdoms. You've got to go to the admitting fiefdom. You got to go to the emergency room fiefdom, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And because, and the crazy thing about a hospital is they have natural value streams, right? They have most hospitals of any size have a natural value stream regarding the heart. That's probably 30 to 40% of their revenue, because there's a lot of heart problems. So that's 30 or 40% of the revenue. They have another value stream maybe about orthopedics, and maybe they have another value stream about babies or whatever. And yet, no one's really in charge of these value streams, at least not as a business, right? And so if you if you could get somebody in charge of the heart value stream in a hospital that can make decisions and focus on that, get everything working together, you'd have tremendous gains. But that doesn't happen. Instead, what happens is you have heart surgeons, you have heart PAs, you have cardiologists, you have heart trained nurses, and they all report to different leaders. And none of those leaders have an overall leader that's in charge of the value stream of the heart. And as a result, things are just kind of a mess. They just don't work very well.
Yeah, so
So-
true.
so-
Yeah, sorry, Shane. Yeah, I was just going to say we've all seen it. I mean, hospitals is a great example because
Yeah.
it's something, it's an institution we all go through, unfortunately, from time to time. And I remember even bringing my mom in when she had cancer, and I remember going in and I remember having to go through the same set of questions and her giving the same answers to about 5 different departments while we were waiting there for about 10 hours. And that's, I think, when you talk about the traditional way of doing things, that's what strikes me as the traditional way. It's these silos. It's no joined up thinking, you know. The strategy is there, but the strategy is in words. It's not in actions, and it's not joined up thinking. So I completely, you know, understand the need in terms of those sectors and the need for turnarounds there. And I know exactly what you mean. And Shane, sorry, you were going to say something there.
No, I mean, right along the same lines, but I'll spin off just a little different direction then. So Art, you have written a lot about this in regards to silos and breaking those down value streams. You know, and you seem to love this word turnaround, because you wrote the Lean Turnaround, you wrote the Lean Turnaround Action Guide, and now most recently, the third book that you have is the Lean Turnaround Answer Book. And I've perused some of the content in that, and there's a ton of information, or I should say suggestions and options in working with value streams, in seeing things differently from the value stream. With all the information that you've put out, you know, ask Art on lean, you know, .org. What prompted, you know, the latest book that you have? Was there anything in particular that you're like, man, I have written about this before, but people still aren't getting it, so let's try again? Or
well, I think the simplest way to answer that is, let me take you through the sequence of the books, because I wrote the first book, The Lean Turnaround, just to pass on all the knowledge that I had learned over 30, 40 years of doing lean in different companies. And I've done it in a lot of different industries, a lot of different companies, a lot of different products, et cetera. And of course, the way that all of us learn lean in the first place was we learned it from somebody else, visiting other companies, et cetera, et cetera. So I always felt kind of an obligation to pass on whatever I had learned to other people so that they could benefit from moving to lean and doing what I, you know, titled a lean turnaround, if you will. And so that book was quite successful, actually. It was aimed at the CEO and the C-suite, if you will, the upper executives, so they could start to understand what this was all about and why it would work anyplace. And it was very successful. So I got a lot of people saying, "Gee, Art, we really loved your book, but how do you really do this?" So yeah, I mean, you told us all the theory and all that, but I mean, actually, how do you do it? So that prompted the second book, the Lean Turnaround Action Guide. And the Lean Turnaround Action Guide is really, if you will, it's like a case study, like a business case study. We took a company and we gave you a 5-year forecast of what it would look like as a traditionally run company. And then we bought the company, and then we took you step by step through the turnaround part. We had a management team that could talk back to us. We had employees that could talk back to us. So it had a lot of dialogue. We had 3 chapters just on Kaizen. We had a chapter on setup reduction Kaizen. We had a chapter on creating flow. We had a chapter on an office Kaizen, because those were very, very important in terms of showing people how you do this stuff, what's involved in the Kaizen, et cetera. So that book was also quite successful, but that led to more questions. And fortunately, the Lean Enterprise Institute gave me a spot on what they call their Lean Post. And this is something they publish every week. And for the past over 8.5 years, I've been writing kind of a monthly article for the Lean Post, LEI's Lean Post. And it's under the heading of Ask Art. And so I just took all these questions that people were asking me, and I responded to them. And of course, that stretched over 8.5 years. And it was 100 articles that we created over that time. I said, well, you know, people might have read, you know, 2 or 3 of them here and there, but no one spent the whole 8 years reading these things. And I thought it would be very good to put it all in one place where someone could use it as a reference book, et cetera. And so we took 70 of the 100 articles and we packaged them into the Lean Turnaround Answer Book. And I think the Lean Turnaround Answer Book is a very important book because it basically answers just about every question that people have about lean. And if you think about a traditional company that's thinking about going down the lean path, they have a lot of questions. Well, what about this? What about that? How do I do this? How do I do that? It also applies to people who started down a lean path, maybe had some success, and then it just stalled out, and they want to get back on track. And they have different questions, but they want to know, okay, we did this and we did this. What do we do next? How do we do? What's the next thing we should do? And so the answer book serves as a resource for anybody that's thinking about lean. Really, you can read the whole book. You're going to get an awful lot of lean knowledge out of that. Or you can just go to the index and pick out the questions that you have about it and read those articles, and you're going to learn a lot from that. So the whole idea of all these books really is just to help more and more companies start down the lean path, because as I mentioned earlier, I think that lean is the best strategic way to run any business.
Mm.
And therefore, I'm just trying to encourage more and more companies to do that, because it's going to really help them. It really helps their employees, it helps their community, it helps society, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's no downsides to it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I absolutely will. Yeah, definitely. Go on, Shayne. Yeah.
So I would, when it comes to starting down that path, one of the articles of yours that I read, I picked out this quote, and in it you said, "I always begin by looking at the balance sheet."
Right.
So explain, how does the balance sheet inform how you approach lean implementation?
Well, of course, most people just take the balance sheet for granted, right? I mean, it's just that's just a reflection of where our assets are at this point in time, et cetera. Nothing we can do about that. I look at it the other way. I think the balance sheet is the most important thing to look at, because when I look at a company, one of the first things I look at is inventory turns. All right. If I see a traditionally run company that's turning inventory about 3 times, which most of them are, if traditionally run, to me, that's a gold mine, because there's all kinds of sleeping money out there. It's just the money is just sitting around the shop floor, not doing anything. 3 times inventory turns, that means that everything that you buy has to sit on your shop floor for 4 months before it can do something else. Why? I mean, if you were in the business of lettuce, you couldn't do that. The stuff would go bad, right? But anything else, it's no problem. And so I look at first at that, because I think inventory turns is one of the most important measurements that you can have as you go forward in the lean turnaround. In fact, you could run your company off of 2 measurements. You could run it off of customer service and inventory turns. If customer service and inventory turns are both going up, everything else has to fall in line, right? But if you look at the balance sheet and think, well, okay, here's a low inventory turn company. There's a lot of money laying here. We learned at Wiremold that we bought 21 companies, and almost all of them were turning inventory 3 times. So we knew that we could take that inventory turns from 3 to 6 in the first year, from 6 to 8 the next year, 8 to 10, 10 to 12, et cetera. And so each time we did that, that just generated a lot of cash, freed up a lot of space, made things a lot easier, a lot cheaper, the quality got better, everything got better. So then the next thing you can look at is accounts receivable. If you look at a company and their stated sales terms are net 30, in other words, you got to pay me in 30 days, and their days outstanding are 55. Whoa, what's happening? Why is that? Is that because they're afraid of the customers? Is it because the customers have a lot of leverage on them? Why, if you have net 30 terms, you have 55 days of accounts receivable? Again, another pile of money. It's just sitting there. I mean, I sold you something. Your only obligation is you have to pay me.
Right.
My obligation is I have to have good quality. I have to have low cost. I have a lot of obligations to you as my customer. You only have one. You got to pay me. And if I'm allowing you not to pay me, that's shame on me. So there's another chunk of money that's sitting there from that. So if you just look at some of the key factors on the balance sheet, it'll tell you what the opportunities really are with a company. It'll tell you 3 times inventory tells you what you're going to see when you go there. When you go to the company, you should understand what you're going to see by looking at the balance sheet. Okay. So that's what I mean when I say that.
And I agree with all of that. One of the problems that I see, I suppose, as a consultant working with organizations myself, is when you go into an organization and you see something like you've just described. You look at the balance sheet, you look at the accounts, I see something and I wonder why the company, let's say, hasn't seen it. And this is not, rocket science stuff, and I'm not very good with accounts. I have to say, it takes me a long time to go through it and figure it out. But I wonder sometimes is the whole, and I think this is, you referenced this in some of your writing, that the whole area of accounts and it is again done in a very traditional way that makes it actually difficult for the organization to use. And I suppose one of the ideas around lean accounting is that we need to be able to make accounts easier to use and to make decisions from. That's something I read in some of your articles. And I don't know, would you agree? Am I on the right track? And if so, how do we do that, Art? How do we make this a whole area of a department easier to work with, easier to take information from?
Well, if you move to lean and try and stay, most companies, traditional companies, use some sort of a standard cost accounting, and which uses absorption, et cetera, et cetera. And if you move to lean and try and keep standard cost accounting, they're going to fight each other. So you have to get rid of standard cost accounting in order to move to lean, in my opinion. But if you think about standard cost accounting and how it works, first of all, it's pretty complicated. You have all these variances, the standard cost variance, this purchase price variance, this variance, that variance. All those are just created at budget time when you put the budget together. And it's variance from the way you put the budget together. But it's also, that makes things very complicated. In fact, I think that standard cost accounting can't be understood by humans. In fact, even the finance guys that are for it, they don't really understand it. They pretend that they do, but they don't really understand it.
Yeah, Mark DeLuzio said the same thing. So keep going.
I feel so much better now. I feel so less stupid now. Thank you.
But as a result, it doesn't give you very good information, right?
Sure.
I mean, think about one of the things that most standard cost accounting companies do is they want to have a detailed cost for every SKU, every item, out to 4 decimal points, right? And in order to do that, there's so many allocations and other things that they throw in there that it just gets very complicated and very confusing. And I've done this a lot of times when I've given speeches on lean and stuff. I'll ask you for a show of hands, how many people believe that the standard cost of every one of your items is correct out to 4 decimal points? You don't get any hands go up because no one believes it. Only the finance guys believe it, but that's because they have to, right? So if you got bad information, and if you got bad information, you're gonna make bad decisions. And what happens when you go to lean, of course, is, one of the things that we're doing, as we just talked about with the balance sheet, is we're increasing inventory turns really fast. And what that means is that the standard cost of absorbing overhead up into inventory, which only occurs when inventory stays the same or goes up, doesn't work anymore. I mean, we're dropping inventory, so you're getting a double shot of overhead coming into this month's P&L. So the earnings might look really bad, even though everything you're doing is very, very good. So the standard cost really fights with lean in that regard. And if you think about the absorption part, most operators, they understand fairly quickly what products in their department that they make. Now, these are functional departments. They're not making a complete product. They're making components. But they also understand which components in their department carry the most absorption hours, right? And so let's say 3 weeks into the month, if they're not making budget, they're not on track, the one thing that they'll do is they'll make all the products that have the most absorption hours, because they don't want to get yelled at, and they know that if they get the absorption hours made, their earnings are going to look pretty good. Now, they don't really care at that point whether you have any orders for those parts. They're just trying to make absorption hours. So now, you're making 200 bases and 3,000 covers, if you can understand what I'm saying. So everything is out of whack because we're not making product for the customer to service demand. We're making absorption hours. And the standard cost system drives that behavior. And with lean, of course, we don't want that at all. We want to sell one, make one. If we don't have an order, don't make one. And with standard cost, the opposite is true. For example, if you're the standard cost accountant and we come in today, we had to make product A, we need 10 machines, but one of those machines is broken today. It doesn't work. That means that I cannot make one single product today that I can sell because one of the machines is broken. I can't make anything I can sell. But the accountants will stay, run all the other 9 machines full blast and get the absorption hours, right? And so they do. And at the end of the day or end of the month or week or whatever, they say, well, we had a pretty good week, because we made the absorption. You didn't make a single thing that you could sell. All you made was more sleeping money, more inventory, right? But
Yeah.
From the standard cost point of view, hey, things are pretty good. Now, if that's good, then that's scary. It's really frightening if that's considered good.
Hello everyone, I am sorry to interrupt this episode of the Lean Solutions Podcast, but I wanted to take a moment to invite you to pick up a copy of my Shingo award-winning book, Avoiding the Continuous Appearance Trap. In the book, I contrast the cultures of 2 companies I worked for, and though each started with similar lean models, one was mechanistic and only gave the appearance of lean, while the other developed a true culture of continuous improvement. The contrast provides a vivid example of the difference between fake lean and true lean. You can find the book on Amazon. Simply search my name or the title of the book. You aren't a reader? No worries. The audiobook is also available on Audible. Now, back to the show.
So we're talking about lean accounting. One of the other things that I read from you, and I wrote this down as well, to become a lean enterprise, everything must change. Every part will have to change to adopt the lean way of thinking. So my question in regard to this, so we have, accounting and all the other components of, or as we talked about before, in the hospital setting, all of those other value streams must adopt. Where in the world would you start with organization? If it's a small business, that makes a little more sense and it's a little easier. But if you're wanting to have that turnaround that you talk about, something big like that, what's the first step for an organization to decide, to adopt that lean thinking? Where would you suggest?
All right. Well, first of all, the idea that everything must change, which is true, scares the heck out of almost every CEO that you ever,
Right.
because they're all starting out saying, well, no, this is a cost reduction program. I don't need to change anything else. Why should I do that? I'm just trying to get my costs down. I'm just going to assign that to the VP of operations and let him do it. But think about this. When I first went to Wiremold, one of the first, I said, all right, we're gonna really have an aggressive lean program here. So we're gonna try and level load the factory so that everything, it can be more efficient, et cetera, et cetera. My first question was, what percentage of our sales ship in the last week of the month? You can ask that for any kind of manufacturing company and maybe even some service companies as well. And of course, the answer was 50%. So I said, well, gee, how am I going to level load the factory if somehow I got to ship 50% in the last week of the month? I don't have the capacity to just ramp up and do that. And besides, if I have to deal with being staffed for 50% in the last week of the month, I'm way overstaffed the other 3 weeks of the month. So the whole thing makes no sense. So then you say, well, Why is this happening? Why is 50% going in the last week of the month? Well, it turns out it's our sales terms. Well, gee, let's change the sales terms, you know? And so that's what I mean by everything must change. You can go like crazy implementing lean, but if you don't change the sales terms or whatever it is that's causing 50% to go in the last week of the month, then almost always what's causing that is something that you did, right? It's something that you created yourself. I mean, it's kind of like, you remember when the automotive companies, they used to have they would build inventory like crazy. Then, oh, we got too much now. We'll have to have these big sales. And so people would, they would train, let's just wait till they have the big sales. Why should we buy it on a regular day?
Oh, yeah, true. So you're actually training
you're training your
customer.
customer to do something that you don't want them to do.
Right.
So what I'm saying is that when you look at 50% in the last week of the month, you're going to find that the reason for that is something that you did. You created that. Okay. And it's the same is true for everything else. You can't have all of your computer systems in batch when you're trying to shift to lean. When you're trying to shift to a pull system, and then you want to run the factory on an MRP system, which is all batch, and you want to continue to have the information on long setup times, even though you're trying to reduce setup times. Your product development has to change such that it's more responsive, it's faster, et cetera. So if you don't, and the accounting has to change so that you don't have standard costs fighting the lean implementation. So to your question of, well, okay, that's nice. Where would you start? I always recommend that you start with the biggest product line or product family that you have, right? I mean, first of all, the first thing you have to do, of course, is you've got to create a lean structure and get rid of the functional structure. I think that's really first. We did that before we did any Kaizen and before we started moving anything. We created a value stream structure. And the value stream structure, in our case, we did that based upon product families. So we had about 7 product families, and we needed a team leader for each product family. And then we were going to give that team leader all the equipment necessary to make that product family complete from raw material to finally in the box, right? And that meant we were going to have to move a lot of equipment around to get those product families together and make that happen, because they were all the equipment was in functional departments. But so before we could even start doing that, we had to create the structure. So the first thing we did was we created the value stream structure. The next thing we did was we created a Kaizen promotion office that was focused on doing nothing but Kaizen all the time. That was their full-time job. And we couldn't go out and hire anybody into the Kaizen promotion office because at the time we were doing this, there wasn't anybody out there. We had to train them ourselves. So what we did is we picked our high potential people that we thought could go up 2 or 3 more levels in the company, and stuck them in the Kaizen promotion office. Didn't matter what their background was, but we thought that was the best training ground that we could possibly have, was put them in the Kaizen promotion office for 2 years. And after 2 years of doing nothing but Kaizen all the time, then we could promote them to team leader or plant manager or whatever other thing we want them to promote them to. So that was I think that's the first fundamental thing, is you got to create the value stream structure to receive the Kaizens, and you got to create the Kaizen ability with the Kaizen promotion office. And we matched that Kaizen promotion office up with some external consultants. In our case, we used Shinjitsu, which were, ex-Toyota guys, all of whom had worked for Shaiichi Ono, creating the Toyota production system in the first place. So we were very lucky to have access to them. But that was what we started with. The next step, I would say, would be to focus on your biggest product line, the product line that you make the most money from, that's the most important to you. Fix that first, get that into a flow, get that into one piece flow, reduce the setup times and all the other things that are causing you problems in that product family. And then go to the next product family and the next product family, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a pretty logical approach. It's a step-by-step approach.
Yeah.
But you're trying to go from from structural organization, functional structural organization, to a value stream flow organization, might as well start by creating the value stream flow organization. I mean, you got to get there anyway. Might as well start off the bat. And we did that with all of 7 product family leaders. Only 2 of them were people that had experience in manufacturing, which is very different than most people would think, because say they're going to be responsible for making the product from raw material to in the box. They should have manufacturing background. We had a lady from inside sales. We had a lady from quality control. We had somebody from marketing. We had our auditor, the company auditor. We put him in to be a team leader. And we had another young engineer from someplace. Anyway, we did it based upon who were the people that we thought could run a small business, that had the ability someday to run a small business, because that's what we were going to give them. We're going to give them a small business, right? And we also, as part of creating that structure, we also got rid of our purchasing department and our production planning department. That's pretty shocking, right?
Yes, it is, sir.
And I say, well, why would you do that, you moron? So, well, we did it for a very simple reason, because when you looked at it, and you looked at it historically, production planning was always planning to make something that purchasing wasn't planning to buy, or vice versa, because they weren't talking to each other. So we said, they got to work together. They got to talk to each other. So what we did is we got rid of the 2 departments, and we created the position of buyer planner. And so every team leader had a buyer planner, and they were responsible for production planning and purchasing, et cetera, for that particular product family. Now, like most companies, there were like 5 commodity things that we bought: steel, plastic, big things like that we bought in big volume, et cetera. And we could negotiate the price for those at a high level, let's say at the level of my VP of operations. And then we could let the team leaders and the buyer planner release things under the contract we had created for those. Everything else, all the smaller things that just pertain to their product family, that buyer planner, they were responsible for doing negotiation, purchasing, releasing, all that kind of stuff, right? So, and then we put the product family manager and the buyer planner, we sat them out on the shop floor next to their equipment. They didn't like that too much, because in our particular case, it was very noisy. Our machines were noisy, the punch presses, rolling mills, that kind of stuff. So, but all of a sudden, everybody understood things are going to be very different. All of a sudden, we got a very, very different structure, right? Everything is going to change. And then we started moving the equipment around to give each product team leader the equipment they needed to make the stuff complete. So for the first 2 or 3 years at Wiremold, machinery, if you walked in, machinery was moving around all the time. You had to watch out you didn't get hit by it, right? But everybody understood, okay, things are going to be very, very different. We're going away from these functional departments. We're going, you have to ask yourself, why do people create functional departments, right? We put all the milling machines in one department. We put all the punch presses in one department. We put all the drilling machines in one department. Why do we do that? Do we think that the machines are going to be happier if they're near other machines, just like
they flock together?
I mean, what do they know? Why would we do that? Because it doesn't make any sense at all in terms of how you make the product. Right? Putting all the machines that are similar in one department makes no sense at all in terms of how a product gets actually made. So there has to be some other reason. Maybe because the machines are happier. Maybe because we think we can have one guy run 2 machines or something like that. But anyway, that's how most people organize. And that creates all the waste. It creates the long lead times. It creates the waste, creates the quality problems. It creates the cost problems, inventory problems. Everything is created by that simple functional structural organization. So you say, where do you start? Get rid of that.
Your approach, Art, is, you already used the word, it's so logical. It's amazing. It's just so logical. It's so structured, and that is a huge part of, I guess, transforming to be a lean organization, organizations need to have this structure, problem solving structure, innovation structure, proper budgets, proper planning, all of this that you've talked about. And you've touched on, you know, the need to have strategic skills. Leadership obviously comes heavily into this. One element I'm really interested in, which we kind of talk about a little bit on every show, because it's such a, I suppose, a large part of a lean transformation or lean in any sense, is the people side. So engaging the people doing the work in, I suppose, transforming and becoming a lean organization. And you've given us so many good examples of what we need to do, you know, in a very logical way. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on how do we bring people in on all this? How do we engage people's hearts and minds in this to make it, I guess, not just a transformation, but a transformation that everyone's proud of, that they're involved in, that helps with their organizational commitment and engagement and all of these things. How do we do that, do you think?
Well, I think you have to start with the mentality of understanding that moving to lean is all about people. It's not about anything else. It's about people. Because if you think about any organization, doesn't matter what industry you're in or whatever, it's only made up of three things, right? It's a bunch of people and a bunch of processes trying to deliver value to a set of customers. That's all. There's nothing left out in that, right? So if you want to change the way that you treat your customers and the way that you give them, bring more value to your customers, you got to change the processes, right? Because the processes that you have today are giving you the results that you have today. And they're giving you the customer service problems that you have today, or whatever it is that you have. So you've got to focus and change those processes. But it's the people that created the processes, right? And so in order to change this, we're going to have to change the people. And I don't mean throw them all out and get new ones. I mean,
Good.
teach them how to see things differently. How are we going to change this? How are we going to get rid of the waste in our processes in order to deliver more value to our customers? Well, the way we're going to do that is by teaching our people how to see the waste in the first place, and then how to go about removing it. And to me, and in my experience, that's all really done through Kaizen. It's just Kaizen, 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 Kaizen. And to your question of how do you change the people, how do you get them to do things differently? It's a result of making sure everybody's on a lot of Kaizens, because the learning that you get on a Kaizen is tremendous. And it changes people's attitude, it changes your culture over time. And so the way that you're going to train people or teach people is to put them on a lot of Kaizens. And so whenever we ran a Kaizen, and we ran a lot of Kaizens, we always staffed the team with half salary people and half hourly people. That's very different than the way most companies go about solving problems. Most companies, when they go to solve problems, they create a team of all salaried people. They come up with a solution and then they impose it on the hourly people. Well, that doesn't mean they're going to be right, or if the hourly people are going to be happy with it. It's just that's the way they do it, and just shut up and just do what we tell you to, right? But if it's the hourly people that are a big part of the Kaizen, and I can almost guarantee you they'll come up, your people that are doing the work will always come up with the best ideas of how to improve the work, because they've been dealing with these issues for a long time. They've tried to raise their hand and say, hey, we should do this. Nobody listens to them. And after a while, they say, well, I'm not going to throw any suggestions in because no one listens to me anyway, right? But now they're on a Kaizen team. We're listening to them. We're doing what they're saying that they're suggesting that we should do. I'll give you some examples of this from a point of view of setup time, right? And one of my favorite ones is when I first went to Wiremold, went out on the shop floor, and we had a lot of equipment, different equipment. I had never seen some of it, like rolling mills. I had never seen a rolling mill. So here I am wandering around, and I said, well, how long does it take to change over that rolling mill? And they said, 14 hours. So I looked at it and I said, 14 hours. No, we can't do that. We got to get that under 10 minutes. Now, of course, they look at you and they say, well, how do we get this crazy man to be our CEO? He obviously doesn't know anything. We just told him it took 14 hours. And his ridiculous response is to get it under 10 minutes, right? Now, it wasn't ridiculous to me, but to them it was. I mean, for the last 10 years, it took them 14 hours. And if I had just gone back in my office and said, okay, get it under 10 minutes and keep me posted, nothing would have happened. It would have stayed at 14 hours. But we didn't do that. We started some Kaizens and another Kaizen. The machine was very busy. We had to make some alterations to the machine. Nothing very expensive, but it took some time. So it took us quite a while, but 18 months later, we could change that machine in 6 minutes. Now, what do you think the people reaction to that is? I mean, first of all, they're going to say, gee, that was interesting. What's his next stupid idea going to be like, right? But beyond that, my experience is it's one of the most rewarding things I've ever, to me personally, is if you challenge a team to do something that they are convinced cannot be done, and then you help them and show them a way to change and make it happen, like the example I just gave you, they are so excited at the end. They are so pumped up and excited because they're the ones that did it. I didn't do it. They did that, right? They made that change. And you know, so step by step, that's how you're going to get people to convert. That's how you're going to change people. They're going to say, well, gee, I guess we can do things differently now. I guess we have the right way to do things. I mean, think about what Toyota did. When in the past, all the big automotive companies, they had one real mantra, right? Which was don't stop the line. Never stop the line. Toyota comes along and says, no. We want to stop the line. In fact, we want to give the ability to stop the line to the hourly people working on the line. We created these andon cords. You pull the cord, stops the line. And when you stop the line, there's people run to that location to find out what's the problem. They get a solution, and that's kind of a permanent solution, and then they go. So what you're really doing in that instance is you're creating a learning organization, right? A learning organization for everybody. Every time you stop the line, this learning is going to occur. You know, you're going to solve a problem. You're going to see what happened and why you don't want to do that again. We learn something. We learn something new. And so I think Kaizen really does the same kind of thing. It creates learning because Kaizen it's not a planning. You're not planning something. It's a doing activity, not a planning activity. It's a doing activity. So we start on a Monday. By Friday, we have a whole new cell, a whole new layout. Everything's different. You know, it's you've done something, and that starts to change your culture. People are like, wow, look what we did in a week. Because you can't spend a lot of money in a week, right? I remember when we first started doing Kaizen, I forced all of my direct reports to be on the first Kaizen teams. And my finance guy, who was a terrific guy, but his first reaction was, I wanted him to be on a setup reduction team. Oh, Art, I don't know anything about setup. I'm the finance guy. And besides, we're closing the books this week. The auditors are coming in, blah, 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 blah. You had all these excuses, the whole long list. I said, no. I want you to be on the setup team and I want you to learn something. So eventually he says, okay. And he goes out there now. You know, just like anybody, historically, you say, well, if we're going to reduce setup, it's going to be capital intensive. We're going to have to spend a lot of money to reduce setup. So as a good finance guy, he decided he was going to keep track of how much money we spent that week to try and reduce the setup. So his setup team went from 90 minutes to change it over to 5 minutes in the week, and they spent $100.
Nice.
Boom, converted. He was the best conversion I ever had. And he helped me so much because he not only understood how valuable that was, but he understood that, well, gee, if for no money, we can go from 90 minutes to 5 minutes. What happens when we do that across the whole plant? What if we reduce all the setups like that? Our flexibility, our ability to respond to the customer is going to be better. Our costs are going to go down. Our quality is going to be better. It's going to be a safer, all these things. And he understood that immediately from just being on that one Kaizen, right? So, you know, when you ask me, how do you get people to learn things and do things? Those are just some examples, right? Learn by doing, learn by doing.
Yeah, and I think that is the key difference between lean and traditional management. In traditional management, top down, here's what we want you to do, go off and do it. People are expected to do it, then maybe they fail and get in trouble. Maybe they don't know how to do it. But with lean, it's about leaders working with people. It's about collaboration, teams working together. It's such a key element of lean. I'm so glad that you were able to tell us about it and give us such brilliant examples, Art. There's so much value in that. Shayne, I think we're probably nearly at the end.
Yeah,
Are
it's
we?
time to wrap up. Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately.
And we've had a fantastic journey though, Art, talking from the beginning, your example of the value stream and everything having the value stream to, changing things over, accounting, how we produce things or how we structure things, moving things around, even physically moving things around, going over to the last part in answering Catherine's question about bringing people along, how to teach them to think and act differently, all of those things. I imagine that there's so much more to be had, and if people want an opportunity or a resource to be able to learn more about this, where can they pick up this book of yours?
Well, it's available in hardcover on Amazon, and also on Amazon as an ebook.
Okay,
that's really where it is. If I could leave you with, if you have a few more minutes, we talked about, you asked about how do you go about this, and I said, you got to start with a value stream structure and all that kind of stuff. There's two other things that I would recommend here. One is, first of all, you need some, you're going to compete on your operational excellence, is what you're trying to do with lean, right? And so you need to define what operational excellence is. You need to define that up front. And in our case, we said, we're going to focus on 5 things, just 5 things. 100% on-time customer service, not 96.3 or something like that, but 100%. We wanted to have a 50% reduction in defects every year. We wanted to have a 20% productivity gain every year. We wanted to have 20 times inventory turns as the baseline target. We were at 3, by the way. So that was like, everybody said, you crazy. And then we wanted visual control in the 5S everywhere in the plant, office, shop floor, every place. So those were the 5 key things that we said we wanted to do. Now, none of them are traditional measurements. They're not. I mean, most companies say, I want to increase my margin by 2 points, or I want to grow sales by 3 points, or something like that.
Yeah.
Those to me are results measurements. It doesn't tell you how to get there. The things that we said, these were all sort of functional or process kind of measurements. They dealt with the processes that we were dealing with, right? So then what we did, we took those 5 measurements and we gave them to all of these value stream team leaders after we created the value stream team leaders. Now, the value stream team leaders had about 85% of all the people in the company working for them. So now I've got all 85% of the people doing nothing but focusing on these 5 things, because we said to the value stream team leaders, we want to know how you're doing on those 5 things. And instead of having a monthly review of financial numbers of something that already happened last month, which we can no longer do anything about anyway, we said, let's not do that. Let's focus on looking forward. So we took the product team leaders and we said, you're going to report every week on the progress you're making on those 5 things. So every week we had a meeting with the 7 product family team leaders and myself and my staff. They each had 10 minutes to tell us how they were doing on those 5 things. And then they also had to tell us what Kaizen they were planning for the next week. So that's how we ran the company. I mean, think about how simple that is, but how profound it is, because you've got 5 things you're focusing on that everybody thinks is outrageous, but when you get to those things, you're going to be a pretty good company. You're going to be hard to beat. So if everybody's focusing on those things all the time and reporting on that, that means the company is looking forward, not backwards. When you're a make the month company and you spend a lot of time at the end of the month closing the books and then having a big financial review, to me, you're looking backwards. You're always looking backwards at something that already happened. Nothing you can do about that. But if I focus instead on my processes and on these 5 things, I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward to when I get to 20 inventory turns. I can't get there right away. I'm going to go from 3 inventory turns to 20. It's going to take me, 5 or 6, 7 years to get there. I just have to be making steady progress, and I have to know everybody's doing that. And so by doing that and having 80% of your people focusing on the things you really want to do, I think it's a totally different way to run a company.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I appreciate that little bonus right there, Art. Way to bring us in with that little bonus content there for those that are still listening to that stuck with us this whole episode. They got a whole pocket full of stuff right there to add to it.
I can almost guarantee you nobody will do that. Even though it makes a lot of sense, it's just really hard to break away from make the month and the way you've always done things to go to something as different as that. But I'll tell you, if you do it, you're going to beat the heck out of all your competition.
Yeah.
That's
Not
awesome.
difficult, just takes intention and structure, as you say, break it down, and good leadership, because that's obviously coming through as well. You good leadership in all of this and helping people to see the right path. I think that's really come strongly through for me as well. You've done this before. You go in, an organization doesn't know where to start. You do. It's about, being able to guide an organization to set up these structures and management systems to be able to do all of this as well. So it's
Right.
obviously that's very, very important. So
Well,
that was brilliant, Art. Just thank you so much. There's so much. I think I need to just listen back over this and go through it. It's like a whole course in 50 minutes. It's amazing. So thank you.
All right. Well, nice to be with you guys. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Art. Have yourself a great day. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you as well. And we'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Lean Solutions Podcast. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe. This way you'll get updates as new episodes become available. If you feel so inclined, please give us a review. Thank you so much.